Hey, it's Drybear. Wild Hearts has released, and unfortunately, we are running into some pretty serious performance issues on PC. Now, like many, I am excited and have been excited for this game as I'm a huge hunting genre fan, and I've been looking forward to playing it. However, I am playing on PC, and it has been rather tricky to get that to work. So today, I'm gonna help you sort out some of the PC performance issues that you're having on your PC version of Wild Hearts, as well as talk about what the actual dev team has said publicly about the issues they've identified and their plan to rectify these issues. If you find value in this video, please consider leaving me a like down below, as it helps me out tremendously in getting this video seen by more people. And subscribe to the channel if you're looking for more gaming content. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. And I'll start by showing you what I was experiencing at its worst. I had all the settings down on low, and I have a relatively medium to mid-high end PC. And so I was having a lot of issues with this. You can see on screen, this was the last fight. This was variable depending on which monster I was fighting. One of the two worst, I think, were Lava Back and the big tusk, the big boar, was super rough in lag. You can see a lot of issues with this kind of jumping around and getting stuck and moving. And they have identified the CPU bottleneck that's happening on screen. We can see everything. It's almost like everything's just swimming in molasses. It's moving very slowly, and it's like everything's in slow-mo. They said they have identified this problem and plan for a fix coming next week. But just know that if you're experiencing this issue, it may not just be you, and it could also not even be your machine in any way. It's just the client that they have released and the issue that they can solve there. But it doesn't mean you can't do things to make the game perform and look better for you right now while you're waiting for that performance patch to go to the live servers. Now, I've spent some time messing with all of the settings in the game to see what can actually help with this performance. The problem with performance is it's so varied, especially on PC. If you ever wonder why it's so consistent to get better performance on a console than it is on a PC, is that the console is a fixed set of hardware. You just optimize for that set of hardware, and you put all your effort into making it run well there. Whereas when you release it on PC, you'll end up getting any number of software conflicts, any number of hardware conflicts, and any number of permutations of those mixing together in weird ways that it's hard to properly test for that. But of course, it could mean that they're not putting enough time into the actual optimization of it as well. So jumping into game, the first thing you want to do is go to graphics. This is going to be the biggest change for you as far as performance-wise. You can actually lower the resolution and then upscale it if you'd like. I messed with this a little bit, and it does actually cause some pretty nasty blurriness. So I wouldn't recommend doing this, but it did seem to have some impact on FPS if you wanted to play around with that. But I would say just set it to native and see if you can get it to work with these other settings that we're going to mention. The next thing is to run on full screen. I know some people, most people, at least in this day and age, prefer to do borderless just because you don't have, alt tab issues or moving around on PC. But I would encourage you to play on full screen. There are some issues that I've identified with windowed and specifically borderless that went away when you run full screen. So full screen seems to be your best bet in getting that. Make sure you have the right monitor selected. Make sure you know which monitor is which. This feature does seem to have some issues with it, but just make sure you have that set the right way. Next is VSync. I've found better results with this being disabled. VSync is usually supposed to help, but in some cases it can hurt depending on how it's implemented. And I would say in this case, it seems to be better to be disabled. When it comes to FPS, typically FPS limits help you run more smoothly because it prevents you from going over a certain point that your machine can handle. And in this case, I would actually recommend running unlimited. You can run 30 if you want. 30 seems to help. Everything over that doesn't seem to make a huge difference in the overall performance. You can run 60 or 120 depending on what performance you're getting, but it actually seems to be working just fine on unlimited, regardless of the settings that you have. Next is going to be your graphics settings. The challenge with these, the way they have these graphics buckets set up, is they actually go much lower than I would expect for a AAA game like this. You can actually make the game look kind of crayon-like if you take all of these down. And because it doesn't seem to be as related to these settings, it can be rough. So my recommendation would be to start preset lowest, and then see if you can get it to perform well. That's always the best thing to do when you're looking at performance. See if you can get a base case where everything works, and then slowly work your way back up until you can maintain the highest fidelity while also maintaining the highest performance. Aside from that, if it does work on all low, then I would recommend keeping textures, model quality, texture filtering all on high. The game actually looks pretty rough without these. The texture filtering you can swap to medium if you want, and you can play with medium here as well. But if you take these all the way down, it is pretty rough on the presentation. But you know, performance wins if you have to. If it works for you on all lowest, then by all means. Particle effects I would take to low. Procedural density I would take to low. The reason here is that a lot of the monsters in this game are very effects heavy. They spawn a lot of VFX and particles, and it's all over the place. It's really cool to look at, but it can cause a lot of issues. Many people are reporting they're having issues with specifically the ice wolf monster, because there's just icicles and ice pieces everywhere. That's all VFX, and so you can actually lower that and improve your performance that way. Shadows you can take down to low, reflections down to low. These two, it's nice to have the higher shadows because it can make a big difference, but if you have to live with less, shadows and reflections are just fine. The way they've set up their reflections, it doesn't look too bad on low. There's some situations where at weird angles you'll get some kind of odd reflections, but in general I think it does handle itself pretty well at low. Next is global illumination. When it comes to environment lighting, it makes a drastic difference in how good the environment looks based on the lighting. So for this is one of the settings I would recommend keeping at least medium or high. If you're looking for performance, you can put this at medium and just let it sit. But having some environment lighting helps a lot in the game's presentation and shouldn't affect the performance too much. Clouds I would take down to low. There's a bunch of these above the level and above the environment that you won't really notice this, and it should help with performance. And then for anti-aliasing, your best bet is probably none, but I would recommend FXAA. It depends on what your software hardware setup is. TAA and FXAA might be fine either way. FXAA probably is your best, and then your most optimal is going to be none, but I would recommend FXAA. And then when it comes down to the post-processing effects here, motion blur, depth of field, I would turn these off. Generally, most people don't like motion blur because it's hard to see. It's a trick that action movie producers will use to make things look faster, and a lot of games use it, but it tends to be kind of a little bit overdone. Depth of field is the same thing. It makes things feel bigger and grander because the things that are farther away get blurred, and so it's a matter of perspective. It makes things look bigger and more immense and grand when you have this effect on, but I would disable it. AO is actually super nice, but it is quite intensive typically, so I'd recommend turning off ambient occlusion on disabled. So these would be the settings I would run with if you're trying to get the best experience for the best performance. And then if this works for you, great, this probably is going to be your best. If not, then you will have to scale these down a little bit. You can try lowering the model and texture quality, although it's going to hurt a little bit visually. And then you can also try upscaling, but it will cause some blurring. If you care more about the game running as well as it can, then these are your options. You also want to double check on HDR. If you do have a monitor that does support HDR and you have this on, this can cause performance issues. So if this, just double check under accessibility that this is disabled, and then you'll find some duplicates of things from graphics in here. But just make sure the HDR is off if you're looking for the best performance. But presumably you'd have to have a monitor that supports this, and it might be on. It's usually off by default in almost every case, but just keep in mind that this is here. Another couple tips from the gameplay side as I've been testing things out. The first thing I'll recommend is to always do one monster per hunt. You can do, which is similar to expeditions in this game relative to Monster Hunter. And I found that after the first monster, things kind of progressively went downhill. So usually I would just do one monster, close out the mission, go back, turn things in, craft, do all that, and then go for the next. Whereas typically my playstyle in these type of games is, if I have the option, if there's something I'm specifically hunting, I will try to hunt everything along the way just to be time efficient. But you have more and more issues. There's also an issue that exists right now where you can actually lose all game sounds. You can keep music on, but there's something that causes it to happen where all game sounds go away. So you lose all combat sounds, weapon sounds, and things like that. So just be aware that the longer you're on a mission, the more chance that you're gonna have issues. So just be sure to reset your missions pretty regularly. And also recommend thinking about removing your zip lines. You can start the zip line and then remove it when you are done with it, just so it doesn't linger. And that's pretty much all you can really do. If there's other mobs or small Kemonos in the area, you can kill them off and harvest them. There's no deployables being left in the environment, but more or less, that's kind of the limit that you have for gameplay. And lastly, let's review the post that the Wolf Hands, the Wild Hearts dev team, posted, identifying the issues they found and what they can talk about here. So this was the first update we got. An update from the team. Hey hunters, we are very happy to see so many of you jumping in. We love you, blah, 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 but we have issues that we've been tracking. A patch will be released next week. We don't have a specific date for this yet, so we're still waiting on exact timing, but they mentioned that next week on all platforms, a patch will go live that addresses several issues and contains the following changes. A CPU threading issue has been fixed. This one is probably the biggest source of performance problems for people in the game. That's that slow motion molasses thing you're seeing. There's just issues with bottlenecking the CPU that's preventing it from running at its best. And it should, for most medium to high-end PCs that are able to run the assets and run the game properly, this issue being solved should fix a lot of those problems. AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX visual artifacts fixed. I think there's other Radeon issues as well, but this is one of them, so that gets solved. The default resolution with launching the game for the first time will now be 1080. They had issues where if you had a much higher resolution or much lower resolution, it would default to something higher and get stuck or kind of have some issues. Additional stability and bug fixes. We don't really know exactly what this is. These might be relatively minor or non-specific, but hopefully add to the efforts of trying to make the game run better. A fix is being worked on for audio desync issues. For now, if you experience this, rebooting the game will often remedy the problem. So not only will you run into the issue where your audio will just cut out and not work, there's also an issue where audio can be delayed, where you can have NPCs talking and the sound won't come out for like a minute, and then all of a sudden everything tries to catch up all at once. So hopefully that gets sorted out. And then a PS5 crash that they've sorted out. And they're grateful and happy, and they want to keep optimizing, which is good. Honestly, I think the core game is really awesome. It's amazing, and I hope they fix everything. And the other note that they had here is that they are working to improve performance and optimize the game for hardware on PC. And they're mentioning, which is a very common issue, that there's just so much variable interactions on PC that it's hard to get it all right. We have a patch coming next week that addresses the bottleneck problem and that should improve performance for mid-high-end CPUs. And they're also actively working on DLSS and FSR support, which will arrive in a future patch. Nice to have, but not the actual end. So that's what we've got from the team. Those are my recommendations for performance, and hopefully you guys are able to find something that works well. I'm guessing that this performs quite well on current gen consoles, Series X, S, and PS5, but on PC right now, it's quite rough. So if you're someone who's waiting on the game and isn't super, you don't have to jump on the gun. You're willing to wait for it. Maybe wait for the performance issues to get sorted out before you pick it up. I would say the game is absolutely worth it. It is amazing, but right now on PC, it is a bit rough. So as always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.